Hi, and welcome back to Police Stories podcast. I'm Dave, and this is episode 12 of a series of short stories about my 28-year career in the UK police force. So today we'll get straight into it. This incident is probably one of the more unusual ones, as you'll hear. I think I've said before that on response policing, uniform policing, people in the public and police kind of tend to look down perhaps on that response role, that sort of base role. You're seen as a bit of a plod, and kind of perhaps you haven't got great aspirations, and why haven't you been promoted, and why haven't you moved on to a specialist unit or whatever. The reality is lots of people spend their entire career on uniform policing, answering the 999 calls. You cannot get more variety. People say, I like variety in my job because it's different every day. Honestly, response policing is that, it just is so varied, and people call you for just the weirdest things. And this was one of those calls. So it was on a night shift. There wasn't an awful lot happening. It was early hours of the morning. It was sort of 2 or 3 in the morning. And a call comes in from an air hostess. Remembering I was based initially quite near Gatwick Airport. So had a lot of hostesses that sort of lived on our areas. So the call comes in, and basically she's terrified. She's on the phone, she's on the nines, absolutely petrified, beside herself, doesn't know what's going on, just knows she was woken up by her cat, which let out some horrible sort of wailing, screaming noise or whatever, completely freaked her out, and the cat looked really shocked. Apparently, it was sort of there was something in the bedroom, or she felt someone in the bedroom in her small flat. She just got back from a long haul flight, basically dumped her case, travel case, on the ground, opened it up, gone to bed, absolutely knackered, really tired from her long flight. Goes to bed, gets woken up within an hour or two by this cat making this noise and sort of leaping about the bedroom. So she doesn't know what's going on, but she's retreated out of the bedroom with the cat. She's basically terrified. So have no idea what we're going to, which is quite often the case. I mean, they're the fun ones in some respects, because you just don't know what's going to happen. It's interesting that in some respects they're the worst ones as well, because your mind can race away with itself, as it probably had with hers. Of all these terrible things it was going to be. Almost certainly in her mind it was an axe murderer, classic, on a film on the telly with an axe, blood dripping off the axe, and almost the reality was it was probably nothing like that at all. But anyway, that was the call we had. So we turn up, a fairly small flat within another couple of flats, quite a quiet night from what I remember saying, not a lot going on. Now that's a word we never use in the police on duty. You'll be really badly thought of if you ever say to a cop, quiet night, quiet day, how's it going? Literally, you'll get a dirty look. Cops on duty, and I think other emergency services, ambulance, etc. are similar, never ever say the Q word. That's as much as we'll go, because that is the kiss of death. The moment somebody says quiet night, or isn't it quiet tonight, etc., the world just explodes. Every sort of strange call you've ever heard of comes out of the woodwork. It's never a quiet night. The worst we get maybe is quite Q tonight, and even that's sort of frowned upon, because you are definitely asking for trouble. Anyway, turn up at the flat. So there was the reason, because it was not much happening, I won't use that word. I think 2 cars had turned up, so there was 4 of us, including the sergeant. So there was me and a PC, similar sort of service to me, police constable. Then there was the sergeant and another PC. So 2 cars. So we go up to this flat. I think it was first floor. So amazingly, I've always told you calls are at always the top flat, but actually I believe this one was the first floor. So we go up to the flat, and she tells us, look, what's happened. I don't know what it is, or more importantly, kind of who it is. I'm convinced there's someone in the room. So's the cat, it's acting really weird. She kept going on about this cat, like it was psychic or something. And okay, right, we'll go and take a look. And we're thinking, to be honest with you, she's had a drink perhaps, or, she's so tired, she's hallucinating or seeing things. This is probably rubbish, So the sergeant says, steps up and says, I'll go and have a look, don't be silly, So we're in the little corridor, the door opens, sergeant kind of nonchalantly goes walking into the room. Now the light was off, which was not unusual, being the early hours, in the bedroom. He turns his torch on, which I thought was a little bit strange. But he turns his torch on. He kind of goes creeping into the room. Very small room, basically double bed, slidey wardrobe, pretty much a couple of bedside, tables. That's about it, basically. There's hardly anything in this room, and her flight bag on the floor, which you can see is open. So Sergeant goes walking off in there with his torch. We're all expecting him to come out and say, no, nothing going on. That's it. You must have been mistaken. There's nothing in there. So he has a look under the bed, gets down on his hands and knees, bends over with a torch, has a look under the bed. No, nothing under there. No axe murderers hiding under there, so that's good. And then basically all that's left is in the room is this flight bag, So he goes over to this and he kind of nonchalantly, and we're behind him, out in the sort of corridor looking through into the bedroom, so we can see him vaguely moving around in there. He kind of nonchalantly moves the bag with his foot, at which point he jumps about 6 foot in the air and lets out this kind of blood-curdling scream, and immediately retreats back, and we're like, and comes running out the room. So we're like, what's the matter? What did you see? We couldn't see anything. So as I say, there's really very limited choices of what are available in this room, what's going to happen. So he's saying, what's happened? What have you seen, And he's really, quite shaken up, and his heartbeat's obviously going because you can hear it in his voice, the adrenaline, which is very obvious when people are super stressed, and he says, it's a snake, so this an orange snake, and we're kind of like, a snake? Are you sure? Orange snake, thinking at this point the sergeant's been drinking, he's like, no, I'm telling you, snake around there, long, hissy, and all the rest of it. And originally he says, it's a couple of feet long. It's a bit like one of those sort of dodgy fisherman's tales, because I think it started off as 2 feet long. By the time he got back to the nick, it was probably a metre. That evening, by the time it's been passed on to the next shift, this thing's like a 3 metre anaconda, But anyway, so he is absolutely adamant there is a snake in there. Now, I must admit, the police is good for wind-ups. There's a lot of wind-ups happen, and myself and my colleague were, very young in service still, probationers with, I don't know, a year in or something. So I was pretty confident he was on the wind-up and this was going to be some big, massive joke, of which we had some good ones in the police, and we'll come on to those another day. Some of them fairly inappropriate. So me and my pal decide to go and have a look. Now, unfortunately, for that sergeant, the one thing that scared him more than anything in the world was snakes. As a kid, that there's always something in there. Some people have, I don't know, ghosts or whatever. For me, it was always werewolves. Obviously we know they're real. Obviously they're not, but that was always a thing as a kid. So anything like that, and even to this day, my wife and what have you will still wind me up and take the mickey out of things like that. So anyway, me and my pal decide we're going to go and have a look for ourselves, and the sergeant's kind of a gibbering wreck at this point. He's like, sure, go and have a look for yourself, because we're pretty disbelieving, actually. So me and my colleague, same thing. The room's dark. He turns his torch on, and we go creeping off into this room. And we're kind of stepping really slowly. And then it hit me, it was so ridiculous. I said to him, why have you got your torch on? And there's a perfectly good light there. Why are we creeping around the dark with torches on? It's ridiculous. So I flicked the light on, and he also realised how stupid it was, but also picked me up on a fair point and was like, why are you whispering? I was like, I don't know. Perhaps in our mind, snakes couldn't see in the dark and wouldn't hear us coming if we were quiet. I mean, so honestly, this was really quite comical all round this call. It was all a bit ridiculous. So now the light is on and we can see we don't need our torches, and we're speaking at a normal level. Pretty convinced we're not going to find anything. So anyway, same thing. We have a quick look around. No, nothing there. By now, the cat's come back in with us. Now, this thing is looking like something out of a horror movie itself. It basically looks like it's been wetted down, blow dried with all its hair directly sticking up, and then kind of hairsprayed or gelled into position. It was walking around permanently with a surprised look on its face, with its hair sticking straight up in the air, which was seemingly a bit odd. And it's now come in and it's wandering around with us, kind of making this low kind of moany noise and doing its sort of toilet brush impression while it's walking around with us. So we go wandering around, and sure enough, we get up. My pal, who's just like in front of me, moves the flight case again with his foot, and sure enough, there is about a 2 foot long, quite bright orange snake, and it had I'm certainly no snake expert. I know very little about them. But it had kind of orange blocks going down its body along with another darker colour. So it was like orange, darker colour, orange, darker colour in a series of stripes. I mean, it looked quite impressive. I'm not worried by snakes particularly, but obviously this was very much an unknown. So we were both looked at each other, we were quite shocked. It wasn't doing a lot, it was just kind of laying there. It wasn't like it was, leaping at our throats or anything. But sure enough, we had confirmed there was definitely a snake in there, bizarrely. So the first thing is, and probably the first question we should have asked, we retreat out of the room again. And although without the high-pitched girl-like scream that the sergeant had emitted, and we said to the hostess, I take it you haven't got a pet snake, and she's like, nope, I definitely haven't got a pet snake. So I said, well, where have you just flown back from? She said, well, I've just got in from long haul. I was in Brazil. So like, okay, right. Now, remember, this is the days before the internet and, well, obviously the internet was there, but certainly before we didn't have phones that, you could look at the internet on. We had your basic Nokia, I can play Snake on my phone. That's it. It makes a phone call. It might send a text if you're lucky, but that's it. There's no checking internet or anything. So we had to rely on the control room for everything. They did a fantastic job. They're absolutely your lifeline to everything, and I can tell you that voice is really comforting. A lot of the time, I might have worked with a particular controller in a control room for 20 years and have never ever met them. I just hear their voice every night. It's a bit of a weird one, but as I say, they're so well thought of, and in your darkest moments, these are the person you speak to, so they do become very much a friend, even if it's only verbally. Most of them are brilliant, of course, like cops and in every other job. Some aren't so good, it's always nice if they've got local knowledge of the area because they can direct you. Oh no, I think the place you're looking for is just up here or whatever. But more and more these days, they're relying on a computer screen themselves just to look at a map and say, well, it looks like it's the next left, but I don't know the area, So anyway, I'm digressing. We call the control room on the radio and say, you're not going to believe this, there is a snake in this woman's bedroom, and we loosely describe it, 2 foot long, slithery, hisses a lot, orange, and it wasn't black, it was certainly dark, it was orange and darker colour, stripy. We have no clue. Do you have some sort of, snake expert on the phone? Because actually the control room in those days had a big book of, weird and wonderful people that you could call on in this scenario, We've had things where, we've seen a wild boar, right? There's a wild boar expert, so people are kind of looking down the list in this book. Oh, yeah, wild boar expert. Sure enough, the control room come back saying, yes, we have got a snake expert on the books. We'll give them a call, remembering it's 2 or 3 in the morning here. So that's what happened. There's a small delay. We've closed the door. The cat has come out. We've closed the door, and that was that. So by now, then the night duty inspector is also coming out, because obviously this is a pretty unusual call. This isn't the sort of thing you go to all the time. So the inspector's come out to have a look as well. So he turns up, and about the same time he turns up, the control room come back to us on the radio and say, right, we've managed to get hold of, it took a bit of time because of the time of day, but we've managed to get hold of this snake expert. We've told them what you've said, and they're willing to come out, but they live about half an hour away, so they're travelling to you. They've got to get up and get to you, but they are en route, but you've got about half an hour wait. So I said, okay. And they said, just out of interest, you might want to know, that we described the snake to him, and he came back and said that it's 2 possibles just from the description. Presumably there are many more possibles, but in his mind there were basically 2 possibles for this snake. The first is it's a completely harmless corn snake that will do you no harm at all. Perhaps maybe looks impressive, has bright colours, which I know that in sort of nature that can mean bad things, but it will do you no harm at all. The other option, now I'm trying to remember what they said, and I'm pretty sure it was some form of coral snake. So very similar sounding to a corn snake, but apparently completely different. And we were warned that snake expert says if this was a coral snake, and it was another name, it was something coral snake. If it's a whatever coral snake, then they are deadly. Kind of one bite, or and they, like we were told all these terrible things, instant paralysis, and you'll never walk again, and heart failure, and you name it. We were told all these terrible things. So like, okay, right, not that keen on going near this thing then. So we thought, fair enough. Well, half an hour, we'll wait. So, as I say, the inspectors turn up about this time. Now, for some reason, the inspector, who was a fairly new inspector, decided that it's best, we don't know where this thing is. It's in the room somewhere. And rather than just leaving it now to the snake expert, which to me was the common sense thing to do, he decided that we should go in and corner it, and have it, know exactly where it is, so that when the snake expert turns up, he can just go straight to it and deal with it. I don't really know why, because why are we putting ourselves on offer, potentially at risk with this, maybe policeman killer snake, when we can just leave it to the expert? But no, he's an inspector. He decides, but I don't expect you to go in yourself. I've got some shields in the car. Now, quite often, a police car, and certainly a police van would carry at least 2 sort of shields, riot shields. There's various different types. You get what's called a short shield, which is the kind of round, sort of gladiator style, heavy duty plastic shield that you'd put on your arm. And then you get a slightly bigger, I think it's called an intermediate shield, that may be, 4 feet long or something like that. You'd have a couple of those, and they have special edges that lock together. So you can make almost like a centurion style, where these riot shields lock together. And then finally you get a much bigger style. I can't remember what they're called, but they're very tall. They're literally about 6 or 7 foot tall, with a slightly curved upper edge to deflect, bricks and things like that, should you find yourself in a riot scenario. But we quite often carried, say, a couple of shields in a car, because if you turned up to a job that maybe had, the aforementioned mad axeman, this was the days before taser, and generally there wasn't firearms cops about, we didn't even have sort of pepper spray CS, none of that. It was basically either a small wooden truncheon or possibly a side-handled baton if you were lucky. So invariably, if you're going to a knife job, you would take a shield with you, probably, because it would just give you that little bit of extra chance. Certainly the units coming to back you up would carry them. So we all carried shields. So the inspector had 2 of the intermediate shields, sort of 4 foot long clear plastic shields that you can see through. And they have 2 handles on the back that you can hold them up in front of you. Now, in some respects, they were unpopular, because if you were getting bricks and things thrown at you, then unfortunately it left your kind of head and sort of from your shins down to your feet exposed. But invariably, if you were on a riot team, you would be wearing leg protectors and steel toe cap boots and things, so you would have some protection. But they were a lot more mobile because they were shorter. So it was a mixed bag. Some people liked them, some didn't. I don't think they were designed for herding snakes, and that's what they were being called on for this day. So inspector goes down, gets these 2 shields, picks the 2 youngest and stupidest cops there, which was me and my colleague, and says, righto, I want you to go into this room, and I want you to to corner this snake. I was thinking, what we're going to do, give it a right good talking to. I'm not a snake whisperer. So the decision was made, we're going to go in, we're going to basically herd it with the shield so that it can't get us into the corner, and then we'll just wait. Because by now another 15 minutes has passed, and within sort of 15 minutes, snake expert should be with us. So, okay, right, we'll do what we're told. I'm not convinced it's a lawful order if you pushed it, but, we were young, and so it was like, yeah, we'll do whatever we're told because we're young and stupid. So we go into the room, the lights are on, Cat's kept out of the way this time, he's not stupid, and we've locked the shields together, so we've got our 2 intermediate shields locked together, but bearing in mind there's about a 2 foot gap at the bottom. We're holding these shields out in front of us. We've had to go through the door initially individually, because you can't get through the door, you're like a dog with a stick otherwise, trying to push your way through the door with 2 shields locked together. So we go into the room individually, we lock the shields together, and we kind of advance like centurions, holding our shields out in front of us, not quite sure how this snake is going to react, and also wondering why the hell are we doing this. So we go in, keep pushing forward. The inspector's just behind us as well. We get up to the flight case. Now we can't see the snake, which is worse than being able to see it, because of course you're convinced it's creeping up behind you at this point. It was like something from a comedy show, honestly it was, these two cops in the early hours wandering around with their shields after a snake. So anyway, we moved the flight case, and it still can't see the snake. So we are getting increasingly nervous as we move around this room. And the only thing left in this room was, I think it was a piece of clothing or a towel or something like that in the corner of the room. There was literally nothing else apart from the bed in this case, which we'd already moved the case and it wasn't there. So we approached this piece of clothing that was on the floor, and we put the shields down on the floor, and my colleague puts his hand around the edge of the shields to try and protect himself, gets hold of the edge of this fabric, and a bit like a magician kind of whips it away quickly. And sure enough, there is the snake underneath this item. Presumably it's getting cold or wants to hide. It's had enough of toilet brush cat wandering around and moaning at it, and a succession of strange cops screaming like girls and running around in front of it. So this snake is there, but now it's really not happy. In fact, it's fairly pissed off. It is, I wouldn't say it's like a cobra and it's like extended up, but it's certainly now raised itself up into quite an aggressive position. Luckily, the shields were on the floor in front of it, so it had about a kind of 4 foot wide plastic screen in front of it with us behind it, but it kind of raises up slightly, and almost as soon as we whip away the actual piece of fabric that it was underneath, it raises up and it actually strikes at least twice, maybe 3 times at the shields, like it's trying to, get us. At which time we're fairly alarmed now, because you can quite clearly see there is some clear fluid on the back of the shield. So in my mind, this is venom or whatever. And of course, it's running through your mind now, is this the harmless corn snake, or is this the deadly policeman killer coral snake? We don't know. And again, I'm thinking, why on earth are we here? So initially, the inspector, whose voice has now got quite high, I can tell you, is like, push it into the corner, so we try and advance a bit, but this thing doesn't move, but it does strike another couple of times. And we're basically getting nowhere with this thing. It's not going back. We're not going forward. We're serving absolutely no purpose. And I think the sort of ridiculousness of the situation dawned finally on the inspector, who, like some big military commander, at a huge battle, was kind of like, retreat, and this isn't a recognised thing, but obviously everyone understands it, and we just wanted to get out there, quite frankly. So still facing the snake, still with our shields locked together, we left it to it basically and retreated backwards out of the room, having to unlock our shields to get out through the door again. But we closed the door, and everyone's kind of a bit stressed at this point, and the inspector's like, right, I think we'll just leave it. We'll just wait for the snake expert. And everyone's like, why didn't we just do that in the first place? That was the sensible thing to do. Anyway, you're the inspector. So that was it. So we waited for Mr. Snake Expert. Sure enough, within kind of now 10 minutes or so, he turns up, thankfully, says, okay, what does this thing look like? And says, well, it looks like this, and, described it to him. And where is it? Well, it's in that room. It was in the corner, blah, blah. He's like, okay, he seems completely unfussed. Meanwhile, the sergeant, who really doesn't like snakes, is now noticeably at the back, and he's pretty much a gibbering wreck. So, Snake Expert, the light is still on. He just opens the door, walks in, says, oh, yes, I see the issue. Says to the hostess, have you got a spare pillowcase? She's like, yeah. Passes him a pillowcase. He puts his hand in the pillowcase. He unceremoniously walks up to the snake and says, oh, yeah, not to worry. It's just a corn snake. No, not harmful in any way. So we're like, okay, right. He just walks up, hand in the pillowcase, grabs the snake very quickly by the sort of back of its neck so it can't get him, and then pulls the pillowcase inside out on itself, ties it in a knot, and kind of walks out the room, in which case everybody is avoiding him like he's on fire. It might be harmless, but, this thing's still obviously wriggling around in the bag, so people are like, whoa, as he's coming near and backing off. And he said, no, it's nothing to worry, honestly, that's fine, I'll put this to the rehoming centre, it'll make a good pet for someone. And he was like, it's lucky it wasn't one of those, whatever it was, coral snakes, he said, because they really are dangerous, So we're like, okay. So that was that. We solved the snakes on a plane. Well, not quite on a plane, in a small flat maybe. But yeah, one of the more bizarre calls. Now, I said to you at the beginning that police do like a wind-up, that's for sure. And I can tell you that it was definitely not lost on anyone just how high-pitched and how scared the sergeant had been of this particular snake, or of any snake, in fact. A little bit unfair because, like I say, we all have things that terrify us. Remember the werewolves, which are real. But I can tell you that for about the next 5 years of this particular sergeant's career, every time he opened a drawer or looked in his desk or got in a police car late at night, there was a rubber snake, in there designed. And he would definitely be heard every now and then to let out a little shriek as he opened said drawer or got in the car. It was not lost on anyone at all of just how worried he was about snakes. So unfortunately, he was very much targeted in a fun way. Nowadays, they might call it bullying and perhaps somebody would put in some sort of employment tribunal claim. But at the time, it was taken for what it was and it was a bit of fun, and in the future, we'll talk about more of the Mickey takes that went on. Some of them were fantastic, really, really good wind-ups. But that's for another day. So there we go, a bit of a shorter one today, episode 12. Downloads have gone crazy this week, best week I've had for people listening, so thank you for that. If it's your first time or if you've stuck with it from the beginning, I appreciate it. And as I say, in continues to be amazing as to from where in the world, which is literally everywhere, all over the world, some, really sort of far-flung places. Have listened in, so that's really good. Had some comments on the YouTube as well. Don't forget, you can go on Police Stories Podcast on YouTube. Obviously, you can listen to it there. As I say, I try and put out one a week, but you can, more importantly for me, you can add comments if you think it's good, or if you don't, or if you'd like to hear something, or if you have a particular question, if you want them longer, shorter, just let me know. But that's that for this week then. Speak to you again soon. Take it easy. Thanks for listening. Cheers. Bye.